Hi guys, so I'm back again with another video. This video is going to be a story time. I got a lot of good feedback on my first story time, which was my labor and delivery story of my first baby, Narayan. And if you want to go take a look at that, you can go look on it on my page. So this video is going to be my second labor and delivery video with the birth of my second son, Nolan Govinda. So let's just get right into it, because his birth was definitely different from the first birth. As many of you saw in my first video, I had my first son at home unexpectedly. So that was very traumatic. So this one was a bit less traumatic, but definitely a lot more intense. So pretty much my whole pregnancy with my second son, it was a bit high risk throughout the whole pregnancy. In the beginning, I had a subchronic hemorrhage. I was basically doing too much, and they were like, okay. So yeah, I was doing too much, and they basically told me that I had to take it easy, to make sure this was a successful pregnancy. That was around 3 months. So from then, high risk the whole time. I had issues with my platelet counts. That was like dramatic, and I had to get infusions like the whole third trimester because I just could not bring my platelets up, and my iron was all over the place, hemoglobin, a whole bunch of things was just going on. So I was high risk, and towards the end of my pregnancy, at 36 weeks is when my doctor was like, no, we're pulling you out of work. You're just doing too much. There's too much going on, and you already have a history of going into labor early. So they didn't want that. So they told me, stop working, take a chill pill. So for 2 more weeks, I was just basically chilling. And that was the best 2 weeks of my life. I didn't have to work. My first kid, Narayan, was in daycare, and I was just indulging in being pregnant. And it was the best 2 weeks of my life, as I said. Now, we're at 38 weeks, and I'm like, okay, this is a whole week further than I made it with Narayan. I'm just kind of feeling big and like a whale, and I'm tired of being pregnant, quite frankly. So my mom was like, okay, come shopping with me. We're gonna go get our nails done. We're gonna get you a pedicure. We're gonna go, walking around and shopping all day, and we're gonna get this baby to come. I'm like, okay, yay. Me and my mother we was going out, we was doing all this stuff that day, and like nothing happened. So I was kind of like a bummer. But I want to say next day, it was either the next day or the day after that, which was a Sunday. And I'm looking at my calendar because I made sure to pull it up this time so I could be accurate with the dates. That was the 23rd. It was a Sunday. I'm like, okay, I'm feeling, some contractions. I'm like, oh snap, we might be getting into it. Okay. And I was timing it, and it just wasn't consistent. So I'm like, I won't even waste my time, going to the hospital or calling my doctor and all this stuff. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna just sit on it, see what's going on. The next day, my contractions kind of slowed down, but I was like, okay, I'll just pay attention to it, because I would still get them every now and again. But, towards the end, you're also having Braxton Hicks contractions. So I was just like, I'm not in pain, so it's whatever. It was a pretty normal day, the 24th. It was a Monday. And I'm just like, okay, I'm just relaxing. Towards the end of the day, it was like evening. I was picking up my son from daycare. I was at my mother's house that day, and I'm like, Mom, I'm having contractions. She was like, oh, you've always been having contractions. Nobody worry about you. They'll probably go away. So it was towards the evening, and I had to pick up my son from daycare. My parents, my mother and my father, they were picking up my niece from her daycare, to help my sister out because she was at work. So, we're all in the car, and I'm like, we got my first son, Narayan, and I'm just like, no, Mom, I'm feeling really uncomfortable now. Now they're getting a bit uncomfortable. And they were like, I want to say 9 minutes apart, if I can remember correctly. It was like 10 or 9 minutes apart. And I'm like, okay, Mom, they getting a bit uncomfortable. Like, y'all driving, and I'm just not feeling it in this car. And my son, I'm like, oh, we're going to go home. We're going to, relax. I'm just enjoying time with him as well before we have a new baby. And I was just like, okay, he fell asleep on my lap. And I'm like, no, Mom, I think I should call my doctor. So I called my doctor, and she was like, how far are they? I'm like, I think they're like 9 minutes apart, but I'm getting pretty uncomfortable. And she was like, no, you need to get to the hospital. And I'm like, what? I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, slow this down for me. What are you saying? Like, because Christian, my boyfriend, he's just like, he's not even next to me. He's at home. I'm with my parents. What are you talking about? And she was like, okay, so I'm going to give you an hour to get to the hospital. Go home, get something to eat, because you're not going to be able to eat when you get here, and then be at the hospital. So I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, go time. Told my parents, hey, my doctor wants me to come to the hospital. So they took my first son, and he stayed over there during this whole time. And she dropped me back off at home to meet up with my boyfriend. And we were like, okay, Mom has Narayan. Let's get you something to eat. Then we're gonna go to the hospital. I remember the meal I had. I had some potato cheddar soup, and it was I don't know what it was. I guess because I knew I wasn't gonna eat for like a day. It hit the spot. So I was like, all right, I'm full. Let's go. We get there, and they put you in the room to observe you first. So they were observing me, and they're like, okay, your contractions are about 5 to 6 minutes apart. I'm like, okay. They were just 9 minutes apart. That was like roughly an hour and a half ago. So I'm like, oh my God, this is really about to happen. So then I'm just like, all right. And then we were just relaxing in the room, in the observing room. And then my doctor came in and was like, your contractions are starting to slow down. And I'm like, of course. And I'm thinking, oh my God, they're going to send me home again. And I'm like, all right, whatever. I'm already preparing my mind like that. And then she was like, no, we knew your contractions were going to slow down because you're not used to laboring in the hospital. And she was like, I'm not going to send you home because I know when I send you home, you're going to have the baby at home because that's what your body is used to. And I'm like, oh, then we're not going home. I'm not, no. So they admitted me. That was around, after observing me for a while, I want to say they admitted me into the room where I was going to give birth in at around 10 p.m. So that was on Monday around 10 p.m. They admitted me into the room, and I was, basically just started laboring. And I forgot to say also, when I got there, I was, I think, 2 centimeters. Now, when I stopped working at 36 weeks, I was 1 centimeter. So from then to now, we're at 38 weeks. I was 2 centimeters, if I'm not mistaken. So then I go into the other room around 10, and now I'm 3. So they're like, okay, we're going to say this is active labor. So they put me in a room, and now I'm laboring. Throughout that night, I'm just like, okay, contractions, they're uncomfortable, but they're not unbearable, but they are uncomfortable. So I'm just letting Christian sleep, and I'm just laying by myself, call my best friend, and I'm like, it's go time. And I'm just letting everybody know, yes, it's go time. We're gonna have this baby. Don't know when, but we're gonna have this baby. So the doctors and the nurses just would come and check on me every now and then. And I want to say it was in the AMs, like when the sun had came back up. And, they were like, okay, now you're at, it was either 4 or 5, because they was like, we would have wanted you to be further by now, but, your labor is kind of like evening itself out. And they were like, okay, we're going to break your water. So that's uncomfortable. They broke my water. And then, like, after that, it was just like, they were like, okay, well, you're not moving fast enough. We're going to put you on Pitocin. I'm like, my water just broke. Like, let it kind of like get me going. Like, and they were just like, no, we're going to put you on Pitocin. Pitocin is the devil. Okay. Like, Pitocin is, oh my God. When I say the worst, oh my God, like there is nothing that compares to how hard the contractions come when you're on Pitocin. I was like, oh my God, like they put me on 0.02%, if I'm not mistaken, of Pitocin. And I was just like, oh my God, like the contractions were so like coming so hard. I just couldn't even like process in my mind. Like I was like, oh my God, when is this gonna be over? They checked back at like, because all this happened like in the AMs. It was all just really quick. And then they checked back at like 10 a.m. and they were like, oh no, you're not moving fast enough. Let's move it. Let's move this up a little bit. Move me up to 0.05. Oh my God. Oh my God. Like, I'm like, this I can't do. Like, I am dying over here. Like, this is worse than when I was at 10 centimeters with my first son and he was coming out. Like, and I'm only 5 centimeters. I'm not about to do this. Like, I was ready to call it quits. I'm like, this is not gonna work. I can't function. I can't even breathe. Like, and they're like, okay, we see on the monitor that your contractions are coupling on top of each other. So we're gonna have to, take it off, and that might slow down your labor. And I'm like, actually, what we could do? And that's another thing. I was like, okay, I didn't want to have an epidural because I had my first son natural. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to try to do it this then. But when them contractions was hitting with that Pitocin, I was like, this ain't cutting. And I looked over to Christian. I'm like, hey, I know I said I want to do it natural, but I don't know if I'm be able to do this. And he was like, oh, nah, if you need that epidural, you go get it because you look like you're in a lot of pain. And I was like, thank you, sir. Please call the doctor in and give me this epidural. And it was like, once I said that, like, I couldn't even breathe anymore. Like, it was just like, my body was like, epidural, epidural, epidural. And it was so much pain. The contractions wouldn't even stop. It was just contraction, 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 contraction. No space in between, nothing. Just contraction, contraction, contraction. And I'm like, that anesthesiologist needs to come in here now. I need to see her in here now because I'm really gonna just faint and pass out because it's so painful. And then they came in and the epidural, it did feel a little weird when they stuck me in the back, but that compared to how bad the contractions were feeling, it really wasn't that big of a deal. I was just like, stick me in my back, please. And everybody had to hold me because I was just like tensing up because the contractions hurting and they're trying to give me the needle in my back. And I was just like, okay, they got it in. I'm like, thank God, because I need this pain to subside. So all of that, everything, all the commotion kind of slows down, and it's like 12 now. And I'm like, okay, I'm 7 centimeters. I'm like, okay, what's going on? I need this to hurry up. And so I want to say like an hour and a half goes by, and I'm like, I'm feeling uncomfortable, but I'm like, I thought I'm not supposed to feel any contractions, I'm not supposed to feel anything. And I'm like, okay, I'm starting to feel like pressure or something. So I'm like, okay, let me call my doctor. I'm like, I'm starting to feel pressure. Like, is that normal? She's like, oh, let me check you, because you're still going to be able to feel pressure if he's moving down. And I'm like, okay. So she, checked me. She was like, oh no, you're only like 8 centimeters. And I'm like, okay. That was at like 130, 140, if I'm not mistaken now. And she checked me and she was like, oh no, you're at like 8 centimeters. You still, you're getting there. You're almost at the finish line, but we got a little bit more to go. Literally, she walks out and I'm like, no, tell her to come back. And of course, she didn't come right back. But I'm like, no, tell her. Like, I'm like, no, something's going on. I could feel a lot of pressure. Don't know what it is. I don't know what it is. Come get her. And it's like 1:58. And she's like, I just checked you. I don't think, And I'm like, no, please check me. Lo and behold, I am now 10 centimeters and his head is down. Like, she felt his head, like, when she checked me. And she was like, oh, you're 10 centimeters. And then, like, it was just like, everybody's like rushing and, moving fast. Because they're like, what? You was 10 minutes ago, just 8, and now you're 10, like, you ready to go. Like, he's coming down. And then we're just like, okay, we gotta start pushing. That was at like 2. And then I started to push, and what I didn't know at the time, but what Christian ended up telling me after, was that as I was trying to push, I'm trying to push him out and he's not coming out. And I did notice, like, sense of like worry, and like, when someone's worried, they like moving kind of fast. And my son had his umbilical cord around his neck, so every time I would push, it was kind of like choking him. So then they had to like cut the umbilical cord, and then after they cut the umbilical cord, I pushed one more time, and then he was born. So it was like really, like, I want to say like crazy, because like with my first son, I was just like so like on like a cloud 9, like you feel all the endorphins. But with this one, it was like, I feel like that epidural kind of like blocked like the full-on endorphin feel of giving birth. But nonetheless, he was born, and he was great. So yeah, that's pretty much it. It was less traumatic, but it was definitely more painful. Oh my God. But yeah, I'm thankful to have him here. He is now about to be 10 months. That flew by. He was born on February 25th. And it's just, I'm blessed to even have 2 of my beautiful babies, because I was actually told that Narayan was going to be my only baby, and I wasn't going to have any more kids because I had PCOS. And somehow Nolan came, and he's my miracle baby. So like I said, I'm just thankful that he's here, and I have 2 healthy boys. So that's the end of my story time, and I hope you guys enjoyed. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and share with all your friends. I appreciate all of you guys' support. All right, bye-bye.